Hi, really quickly, I want to talk about, consonants in Old English. Okay, sorry. Consonants. Um, so with consonants in Old English, most of them are going to be pronounced the same as in modern English, and part of that's the way we've arranged things in our Old English texts. There are some important things to keep in mind. For example, there are some letters that don't exist in modern English. One of them is thorn, and this makes a th sound. You'll see this in Old English text, both in capital and lowercase. You'll also see eth. Lowercase looks like this, and capital looks like this. And this will essentially denote the same sound, so a th sound. Another thing to keep in mind is the win. This is a rune, just like thorn. Thorn was originally a rune. And it has a capital, lower, and uppercase, and it makes the W sound, a W sound. So these things are important to keep in mind because some texts will annotate things slightly differently. Remember, thorn, eth, and win. If you remember what they look like and the sounds they make, it won't be a problem if you see a text that has a win in it or a W, because you know they're both meant to make the same sound. And most modern texts will just use a W actually instead of a win, but you should be aware that is an Old English consonant, a letter that is used. Another thing to keep in mind, so we don't have silent consonants in Old English, so they wrote how they spoke, and if they didn't say they spoke in a weird way, that's then they spoke in a weird way, but they did write how they spoke. So for example, we have in our modern English the word night. We have these silent consonants in here because originally it was pronounced nicht. So they were originally said. Sorry, that's supposed to be an N. So keep that in mind. Also, voicing is important. Oh, sorry. Voicing means there are some consonants that are voiced and some that are not voiced. So in a modern English example, if you take V and you feel your vocal cord when you say it, v, it vibrates. If you feel your vocal cord when making an F, it doesn't vibrate. They're exactly the same sound except for that quality. When a sound like F, when a sound like F is followed by, which is unvoiced, is followed by voiced consonants, are surrounded, I guess, by voiced consonants. So on either side, you got a voiced consonant. It will be pronounced voiced. So if we have the Old English word helvan, this would actually be pronounced like a V, not like an F. And so that also, other voiceless consonants like thorn, the th sound, will be pronounced like the, a voiced version of it, in between voiced sounds. And remember, vowels will always be, in Old English, voiced. Usually in other languages too, but it's not as simple. So in Old English, vowels will always be voiced. Some other things to keep in mind, when we say there are no silent consonants, that also means double consonants. So if two consonants are written, pronounce something two times. The Old English word fremme, which is the first person singular present indicative active. You'll learn those terms later. For to do, so I do basically, you pronounce two M's, fremme. So that's also very important. Also, we'll see a convention with C's and G's where sometimes they'll have a little dot placed above them. So we'll want to talk really quickly about what this means. So the undotted C is pronounced like a K sound. It never is pronounced like a S, like an S or a sh. It's always pronounced like a C, basically like the first sound you learn for a C, a K. And the dotted C is going to be pronounced like a CH, a ch. So like if you say child, it's going to be pronounced like that. And the CH is never pronounced like a sh sound, like maybe in French or a French loan where it's into English. It'll always be pronounced like the dotted C will never be pronounced like a sh, always like a ch. If we want to make a sh sound, it will be SC. So for example, this occurs in the word for ship in Old English, an SC together. The G also can be pronounced or printed, with a dot. So the G without a dot will be pronounced like a G, like you're used to doing with G's, but never like a J. When it comes at the beginning of a word or syllable. When it's between two voiced sounds, so remember we talked about voicing before, the G without a dot is going to be pronounced like a R. So if you speak Spanish, this is sometimes how we pronounce G's between vowels as well. So it's a G that doesn't completely close in your mouth. So R. This is also a sound that is present in Dutch, for example, which is a related language, so that makes sense. Also, when it's dotted, it will usually be pronounced Y, like as in yellow, except for when it comes after an N. So if we have N dotted G, then we can pronounce that as J. So something to keep in mind. Next important thing is a CG, C and non-dotted G. This will also be pronounced as a J, as in just. And H. Here's another thing. The H in Old English is slightly different from in Modern English. It occurs with a lot of other consonants. So in consonant combinations, that can be difficult. It's also very often occurs at the ends of words, which is also very difficult for modern English speakers. It was probably a ch sound, like in German. And German has two ch sounds. It has one sort of more at the back of your mouth and one at the front. So in certain circumstances, when it was near maybe like an E or an I, it was probably pronounced closer to the front of your mouth, and some circumstances at the back of your mouth. Generally, people do those things naturally, however, because E's and I's are pronounced in the front of your mouth, and it's hard to go all the way back there. But you should pronounce it heavier, sort of like a ch sound. And always pronounce it even if it's at the end of the word. The next thing we want to talk about really quickly is that spellings, especially with consonants, are somewhat variant. So in some dialects you're going to see certain variations where some things are going to look like they're spelled a little bit more differently in one dialect than another. This doesn't mean too much. Just be aware that there will be variation, particularly in a lot of the consonants. And they were probably pronounced differently in different areas too. So just be aware of that. That does go also for the vowels also. There's some variation in spelling with vowels as well in different areas where Old English was spoken and written.